This guy possesses a vast arsenal of infinite skills, unmatchable status, and limitless levels. He wields every form of magic and talent in existence, granted the unique ability to manipulate his own statistics at will. With a single thought, he can skyrocket his power into the millions to annihilate a massive horde of high-ranking monsters with one spell, or even surge to 100 million to shatter a legendary dragon with a solitary punch. Whatever magic he requires, he need only think of it to claim it as his own. There is a great deal more to discover about his true potential, but before I spoil the journey ahead, let us begin the story. Tomoya Yumisaki drifted in the quiet of sleep within his school until a sudden jolt of consciousness forced his eyes open. The familiar classroom was gone, replaced by an imposing alien environment and a crowd of strangers. His classmate, Yukuno, voiced the collective confusion of the group, questioning the identity of the people standing before them. The students exchanged bewildered glances, grappling with the fact that they had been in their own world only a moment prior. A priest silenced the growing murmur by striking his staff against the ground, demanding order. Reina von Flarelode, the second princess of the Flarelode kingdom, offered a sincere apology for their distress. She began to explain their current reality. They had arrived in the world of Alphys. She described the eastern continent of Mireld, a human stronghold where the Flarelode kingdom flourished, and the adjacent central continent, Frenride. From Frenride, the demon tribe beings of immense terrifying power launched periodic invasions against Mireld. While the various nations dispatched night orders to hold the line, Reina admitted that their defenses were failing. To prevent total collapse, the kingdom performed a hero summoning to bring forth legendary saviors from another world. Yukinu processed the information, remarking that while the story seemed surreal, the evidence of their surroundings left him no choice but to believe it. Tomoya remained silent, privately concluding that cooperation was their only logical path. If the princess spoke the truth, they were guests. If she lied, resistance would only invite hostility. Regardless of the truth, he resolved to remain observant and prepare his own contingencies. Fred von Flarelode, the king of Flarelode, took command of the assembly. He asserted that he would oversee their future personally, informing the students that they would undergo rigorous training to prepare for their ultimate duty, defeating the Demon King. Kunu stepped forward to inquire if they truly possessed the necessary strength and, more importantly, if there was a way to return to their original world. The king responded that a return method existed, but claimed it was a secret known only to the Demon King. To go home, they were told they must defeat him and extract the knowledge. Tomoya found the king's logic suspicious. He wondered how the king could be so certain of the Demon King's knowledge when the kingdom itself lacked the means to send them back. As the king gestured to an assistant holding 5 status cards, he assured the group that they possessed the latent power to succeed. He explained that these cards, blessed by the chief god El Tora, converted an individual's potential into measurable letters and numbers. The king activated his appraisal skill to verify their abilities and was visibly stunned by the results. He transcribed Kuno's card and presented it. The boy held the occupation of hero with values of 300 across attack, defense, agility, and all magical attributes. His skills included language comprehension, level 4 mastery of all magic and swordsmanship, and heroic transformation. The king noted that an average person at level 1 usually possessed a value of 10 in all categories, making Kuno a once-in-a-millennia prodigy. He moved through the other students with equal excitement, noting their abundant skills and excellent potential. However, when the king appraised Tomoya, his enthusiasm vanished. His eyes widened in shock as he saw that every single status on Tomoya's card was a 0. He handed the card to Tomoya, remarking that he never imagined such a failure could occur. Tomoya stared at the card, seeing the lack of blessings for himself. The court was thrown into a quiet panic as they debated whether Tomoya could even participate in the war. The king declared an emergency meeting to decide Tomoya's fate, instructing the students to wait. Reina apologized for the unfortunate revelation, but Tomoya offered her a brief reassurance. Internally, he focused on a strange detail. His card did not just show a single 0, but a double 0. He wondered if there was a functional difference between having no skills and the specific numerical designation he saw. Upon his return, the king addressed Tomoya Yumisaki, informing him that because his power was insufficient for combat, he would be sent to a nearby town to live as a guest until the other heroes defeated the Demon King. Tomoya asked for confirmation that his safety would be guaranteed, and when the king affirmed this, Tomoya felt a surge of relief. To him, this was an ideal outcome. He felt no bitterness about the lack of power or the summoning. Instead, his curiosity about this new world far outweighed any dissatisfaction. He accepted the offer, viewing himself simply as an ordinary bystander caught in a heroic summoning. Sometime later, outside the castle walls, a knight confirmed that Tomoya had rested well before beginning their journey south to the town of Lugard. The knight warned of monsters on the highway, and Tomoya realized the man was acting as his personal bodyguard. As they moved through the countryside, the breathtaking scenery finally made the reality of his situation sink in. He was truly in another world. The journey was interrupted when the knight alerted Tomoya to an approaching monster. Tomoya watched from the safety of the carriage as the guards faced a wolf. He observed a weaponless guard manifest an ice shot and an ice sword to dispatch the creature, urging his comrades to remain aggressive. The display of magic in combat amazed Tomoya, making him realize that even higher-level battles must exist in this world. While he had accepted his lack of ability, a part of him longed to experience such power and travel the world on his own terms. Upon arriving at a grand mansion in the town of Lugard, Tomoya was warmly received by a noble girl who introduced herself as Cynthia Cynthia von Ernerk. She explained that she had been briefed on his circumstances and expressed her eagerness to work with him. She then invited him inside, noting that her father was waiting to receive him. Within the estate, Rissel von Ernerk, the master of the house, offered a kind welcome. He confirmed that a messenger had already informed him of the general situation. Tomoya was a hero summoned from another world who lacked the power to fight. Rissel assured Tomoya that per the king's decree, he would be treated as an honored guest until a way home was found. He remarked on the rarity of someone possessing absolutely no power, but emphasized that this detail was a secret known only to his family, as the king had strictly forbidden the spread of such information. Tomoya bowed in gratitude, and Rissel, dismissing the thanks, suggested they move to the main subject. Rissel began by assessing Tomoya's knowledge of the world. Tomoya recounted what he had learned, that they were in the flare-load kingdom of the eastern continent, Mireld, which was currently besieged by the demon tribe from the central continent. To provide a more comprehensive explanation, Rissel directed Cynthia to bring a map. As the map was laid out, Rissel detailed the global geography. He explained that Franrida was the central continent of the demons, Mireld was the eastern home of humans, Arsna to the north belonged to the demi-humans, Dragna to the west was the domain of the dragonkin, and Fruna to the south was the continent of the beastmen. He clarified that while these races formed the majorities of their respective lands, demi-humans and beastmen also lived in Mireld. While he doubted Tomoya would travel to other continents, he turned the discussion toward the local town of Lugard. Cynthia offered to serve as Tomoya's guide, noting that they would need to purchase several essentials for his stay in the house. During their conversation, Tomoya appeared slightly caught off guard, leading Cynthia to worry she had been rude. Tomoya chuckled and scratched the back of his head, explaining that he was merely surprised she had used his first name so suddenly. This led to a realization regarding their naming conventions. Tomoya explained that in his world the family name comes first. Cynthia, realizing she had inadvertently addressed him by his given name upon their very first meeting, became visibly embarrassed. Tomoya quickly reassured her, stating he preferred being called Tomoya, especially since calling her Ernerk-san would be confusing with two of them in the house. He requested permission to call her Cynthia-san. Cynthia composed herself and agreed, even suggesting they drop the stiff, polite language and honorifics entirely. As they shook hands, Rissel cleared his throat with a cough, remarking with a smile that he was pleased his daughter had found a friend her own age. Cynthia then led Tomoya to the commercial district of Lugard's East District. Pointing out men equipped with swords and pouches, she identified them as adventurers. She explained that Lugard was known as a hub for adventurers and housed a guild in the South District. Tomoya privately resolved to visit the guild if the opportunity arose. After Cynthia helped him pick out and purchase new clothes, she remarked that they suited him perfectly. Tomoya thanked her and promised to repay the debt one day. Though she told him not to worry, Tomoya felt uneasy about being a burden and wondered if there was a way for someone without power to earn money. He asked Cynthia if she possessed a blessing, and she confirmed she had support-type magic, though she admitted she was not suited for combat. Their peaceful excursion was suddenly shattered by a sense of dread. A man ran through the street, shouting a warning that a group of monsters had breached the east gate and were approaching. Cynthia identified the creatures as gray wolves, dangerous C-rank monsters that they could not hope to defeat. She urged Tomoya to flee into a back alley, and he quickly agreed. However, as they retreated, Cynthia spotted a child who had tripped in the path of an oncoming wolf. Without hesitation, she ran back and stood before the child to protect her. Tomoya watched in disbelief, paralyzed by the knowledge that she had just admitted she couldn't fight. He couldn't understand why she would take such a risk, and knowing he was powerless, he screamed for her to stop. As the wolf lunged at them, Tomoya's instincts took over. He moved to the front, consumed by the desperate wish to fight back and help them. He swung his fist at the charging beast, and to his absolute shock, the impact blew the wolf into pieces. In that moment, a system notification manifested before his eyes. It announced the activation of appraisal level Infinity, and revealed his true status. He held the occupation of Infinity, and his attack, defense, agility, magic power, magic attack, magic defense, and all of his skills were listed as Infinity. Tomoya stood in a state of shock, realizing that his status was far from the zero the king had proclaimed. When Cynthia finally opened her eyes, she gazed around in confusion, asking where the wolf had gone. Tomoya informed her that he had defeated the creature, pointing toward the corpse rolling nearby, while advising her to look away from the grim sight. Cynthia was incredulous that he could overcome a C-rank gray wolf and pressed him for an explanation. In response, Tomoya lowered himself to the ground, and using the wolf's blood staining his hand, drew the symbol for Infinity. He asked if she recognized the mark, but Cynthia remarked that she had never seen such a character before. Tomoya realized that the concept of Infinity did not exist in Alphys, concluding that the king had mistaken the horizontal 8 for a double 0 when transcribing the status card. Reflecting on his newfound strength, Tomoya noted that he hadn't felt any different until the moment of conflict. He deduced that his power only manifested when he harbored a direct desire for it, because he had wished for the strength to save Cynthia. That exact measure of power had surged within him. As he analyzed this Infinity talent, Cynthia warned him that more monsters were closing in. Now confident, Tomoya told her to leave the situation to him. He stepped forward and with a series of precise strikes began systematically destroying the gray wolves one by one. Cynthia watched in awe as he dispatched the threats with ease. While Tomoya focused on securing the immediate area, his attention was drawn to a woman standing in the distance. He surveyed the scene, noting that over 20 wolves had been slain, effectively halting the monster incursion. Bystanders immediately identified her as the Red Knight, a renowned B-rank adventurer. They marveled at her beauty and her legendary strength. Tomoya observed her red hair and light armor, thinking the title was perfectly suited to her. When she flashed a smile in his direction before departing, he felt himself flush. Nearby, the young girl he had protected was reunited with her father, waving a grateful goodbye to Tomoya as they left. Later, at the Irnark mansion, after Rissel heard what happened, he informed Tomoya that a close aide to His Majesty was scheduled to arrive that evening, so he will tell him what happened. He realized that the king had fundamentally misread the status card, resulting in the earlier misunderstanding. Tomoya thanked the count for mediating with the crown, but Rissel insisted the gratitude was his to give. Noting that Tomoya had saved his daughter, he jokingly remarked that Cynthia had a habit of acting before thinking, a comment that caused her to protest in embarrassment. Cynthia admitted her actions were reckless but remained fixated on Tomoya's potential, suggesting that his infinity status meant he might possess enough power to defeat the Demon King with ease. Rissel agreed, noting that Tomoya appeared to have no upper limit to his capabilities. Tomoya merely chuckled, privately noting that while he was surprised by his own circumstances, his presence must seem utterly extraordinary to the people of this world. After Cynthia showed him to his quarters and introduced him to Rissel's wife, the group shared a meal served by the household staff. Retiring to his room, Tomoya looked at his hands, reflecting on how quickly his outlook had shifted from the despair of being powerless to the reality of his current state. The following morning, Rissel provided an update following his meeting with the king's aide. Surprisingly, the crown offered no argument or resistance to the new information. Instead, the kingdom decided to cease all interference, leaving Tomoya's management entirely to the House of Unark. While Rissel was prepared to travel to the capital to demand an audience and prove Tomoya was a true hero, Tomoya requested that he refrain. He explained that he had no desire to risk his life fighting the Demon King, or to carry the burden of being a hero. Rissel questioned if Tomoya wanted to uncover the mysteries surrounding his summoning, to which Tomoya replied that while he was curious, he preferred to accept the current peace. He realized that being ignored by the state granted him the freedom to move as he pleased. He decided to embrace a carefree life, fulfilling his dream of adventuring and seeing the world. He bowed to Rissel, suggesting they conclude the formal discussion for the time being. Guided by Cynthia, Tomoya eventually reached the South District of Lugard. He noted the increased density of adventurers compared to the East District. Cynthia, her eyes sparkling with excitement, confessed it was her first time entering this part of town. She explained that her father had previously forbidden it due to the rough reputation of some adventurers, but he had granted permission today, trusting that she was safe in Tomoya's company. Tomoya gave a simple nod, amused that she seemed even more thrilled than he was. Finally, he pointed toward a specific building, the place he had dreamed of visiting since arriving in this world, the Adventurers Guild. The atmosphere inside the guild was unexpectedly vibrant, teeming with activity that momentarily took Tomoya and Cynthia by surprise. As Tomoya wondered if everyone present was an adventurer, Cynthia spotted the reception desk. They were greeted by Ella, the guild receptionist, who inquired if it was their first time and how she might assist them. Tomoya declared their intent to register, prompting Ella to provide a necessary orientation. She explained the hierarchical nature of the guild, noting that as an adventurer's rank increases, so do their privileges and their obligations. High-ranking individuals, she cautioned, might receive mandatory state requests that cannot be refused. She detailed the party system, noting that a group's rank is determined by its leader. Furthermore, she explained that monsters and requests are categorized into ranks, further subdivided into high, mid, and low tiers to specify difficulty. Under guild rules, a party can only accept requests within one rank of their own standing. With the basics established, Tomoya signed the necessary documentation. The process then moved to the creation of status cards. Ella requested to see their existing cards if they had them. Tomoya realized this was a critical moment. If he presented his true infinity status, the ensuing shock would be unmanageable. He urgently whispered to Cynthia for a solution. She suggested using a concealment skill to falsify the appraisal results, explaining that only someone with a higher appraisal level could see through the ruse. Tomoya activated the skill, carefully manipulating his displayed stats to a level he deemed sufficient to have defeated the Grey Wolves from the previous day. He then presented his information to Ella, apologizing for the delay. After processing the data, Ella handed him his new card and his corresponding guild rank, directing him to the bulletin board for assignments. Finally an adventurer, Tomoya eagerly approached the board with Cynthia to browse the available tasks. Among the requests for herb gathering and carriage escorts, an A-rank mission to subjugate a dragon in the southern Margino Mountains caught his eye. He was thrilled by the prospect of earning the Dragon Slayer title, especially upon noticing that the client was racial. Cynthia recalled her father mentioning his concern over the lack of local adventurers capable of handling an A-rank threat. Tomoya boldly declared that he would step up, but Cynthia quickly reminded him that as a C-rank, he was ineligible for an A-rank quest. Deflated, Tomoya searched for a loophole, asking if a B-rank party could accept the mission and if a C-rank could join such a group. Cynthia confirmed it was theoretically possible, but doubted any B-rank adventurer would be eccentric enough to take on a higher-ranked monster while carrying a lower-ranked partner. "The two of you are having a very interesting conversation," a voice interrupted. The Red Knight suddenly appeared, asking to join the discussion. Tomoya recognized her immediately, and she introduced herself simply as Line, waving off formal titles. She greeted them by name, revealing that she had indeed seen Tomoya taking down the Grey Wolves the day before, a revelation that secretly delighted him. When Tomoya explained his predicament, Line laughed and grabbed the request from the board. She announced that the eccentric person he was looking for was standing right before him. She explained that she had been wanting red dragon fangs for some time, and invited Tomoya to form a party with her. When they presented the request to Ella, the receptionist was horrified, calling the move reckless. She pointed out that Tomoya was a brand new C-rank, who had only barely cleared the minimum criteria, suggesting he would struggle even with C-rank monsters. Line was puzzled and asked Tomoya if his average status was truly around 3,000. When he confirmed it, Line noted the discrepancy. A pack of Grey Wolves is considered B-low strength, yet Tomoya's displayed stats suggested he was only a low-tier C-rank. Pulling Cynthia aside, Tomoya asked for clarification. Cynthia apologized, explaining that while those stats qualify for C-rank, she hadn't realized there was such a massive skill gap within the tiers. Tomoya wondered how to talk his way out of the inconsistency, but Line merely chuckled. She told him she had already made up her mind, asserting that status numbers aren't everything, and that she chose to trust her own eyes. She extended her hand and Tomoya, moved by her faith in his strength, shook it and pledged to do his best. Ella sighed, noting that once Line set her mind on something, there was no stopping her. Back at the Ernark mansion, Rissel reviewed their plan. Though he did not doubt their skill, he reminded them that an A-rank monster was a formidable opponent and pleaded with them to prioritize their lives above all else. He advised them to prepare and depart the following morning. As Line took her leave, promising to meet Tomoya at the south gate, Tomoya turned to Cynthia with a final request. Having lived in a world without mana, he admitted he had no understanding of magic or how to control his own power. He asked her to teach him the fundamentals so he could have a firm grasp of his abilities by morning. Cynthia agreed on one condition: he had to promise to return to the house safely. With a smile, Tomoya gave his word. The following morning, Tomoya looked at his newly bought sword. Having manually set his status to the swordsman occupation, he felt it was a necessary precaution, though the blade felt alien against his side. The combined weight of the weapon and his luggage made movement cumbersome, leading him to wish for some kind of expansive, invisible space where he could store his belongings and retrieve them at will. To his startle, the system responded immediately, activating a skill called dimensional storage at an infinity level. Watching the space before him warp and ripple, Tomoya realized the skill had manifested simply because he desired a more convenient way to travel. He tested it by moving his bag toward the rift and watched in amazement as it vanished into thin air. Reaching into the distortion, he successfully pulled the bag back out. He marveled at how his infinity power truly worked. It seemed an appropriate skill would activate the moment he felt a genuine need for it. This power was proving to be far more versatile than he had initially imagined. Upon reaching the gate, Line greeted him warmly, noting with surprise that he appeared to be traveling incredibly light. When Tomoya explained that he was using dimensional storage, Line was visibly taken aback. She remarked that such a skill was exceptionally rare, and seeing the opportunity, asked if he had enough room to carry her belongings as well. Tomoya hesitated, pointing out that her bag contained her money and personal items, but Line dismissed his concern with a smile, asserting that there was no way he would steal from her. Tomoya sighed, realizing Line was perhaps even more optimistic and trusting than he had suspected. He felt a twinge of guilt for being so vague about his true abilities when she placed such absolute faith in him. Line then gestured toward his new sword, noting the lack of nicks or dirt on the blade. She questioned the wisdom of facing an A-rank monster with an unfamiliar weapon, especially since she had already seen him defeat a Grey Wolf with his bare hands. Tomoya internally cursed his carelessness, realizing he looked like an amateur bringing a brand new toy into a life-or-death struggle. He expected her to be disillusioned, but to his surprise, Line burst into laughter. She told him his unconventional nature was exactly why she had invited him to her party, curious to see how a person like him intended to fight. Moved by her words, Tomoya silently resolved that he would protect her at all costs, regardless of whether his true status was exposed. When Tomoya asked about their transport, Line revealed they would be sharing a single horse. As they set off with Line in the lead, the jolting of the horse made it difficult for Tomoya to stay balanced. Line told him he wasn't holding on properly, and guided his hands to wrap firmly around her waist. Tomoya turned bright red, acutely aware of the physical contact. Since she wasn't wearing armor around her midsection, he could feel how soft she was. It was a level of intimacy he had never experienced in his original world, and he found it far more nerve-wracking than the prospect of facing a monster. Their journey was soon interrupted by a pack of black wolves, B-rank creatures the size of lions. While Tomoya wondered if they should dismount, Line handled the initial threat from horseback, decapitating the lead wolf with a single, fluid swing. She remarked that she was in top form and instructed Tomoya to store the valuable fur in his dimensional storage. As a survivor of the pack growled at them, Tomoya stepped forward, asking Line to let him handle this one. He wanted to test his proficiency with a sword against a B-rank opponent. He manually adjusted his status, setting both his attack and agility to 6,000 present to match the threat level. He noted that the black wolf was significantly faster than the gray wolves he had fought previously, but his enhanced reflexes allowed him to keep pace. He struck the wolf's head, noting the increased power behind his swing, and decided to try a technique Cynthia had taught him the night before. Cynthia had explained that magic attack wasn't just for spells, it could be used to coat a physical weapon in mana to amplify its striking power. Tomoya channeled his magic power into the blade, and with a single empowered swing, he cleaved through the monster. Line watched the display with a complicated expression. She told him that while it was a bit awkward to point out, the way he had just fought was mathematically impossible given the status he had shown her at the guild. Caught in his lie like a child caught stealing sweets, Tomoya could only hope she wouldn't press him for any further details. Before we continue, let's introduce his other three classmates, Miho Sakura, Riko Funabashi, and Yui Yanagi. After some time spent on the trail, the pair managed to fell a mid-tier flying rabbit, which they transformed into a hearty dinner of rabbit and vegetable stew. Line hummed with satisfaction, remarking that she never expected to enjoy such high-quality cuisine during a wilderness expedition. Tomoya admitted he was glad he had the foresight to borrow cooking utensils, explaining that he was quite accustomed to preparing his own meals. Line noted that his culinary skills alone made him a valuable companion, though Tomoya playfully told her not to limit his worth to his cooking. Following the meal, Tomoya asked about the sky-slash technique Line had utilized earlier. She explained that the move was a sophisticated application of her skills, and she offered her status card to him for reference. Her profile revealed she was a level 36 swordsman and a B-rank adventurer, boasting 8,080 attack, 7,800 defense, 6,990 agility, 7,600 mana, 8,420 magic attack, and 7,700 magic defense. She detailed that Sky-Slash functioned by combining her level 5 swordsmanship with level 4 spatial magic, allowing her to fold space so her blade could reach distant enemies instantaneously. Tomoya thanked her and activated his dimensional storage to retrieve his own card. Feeling it only fair to reciprocate, he mentally added interdimensional storage level 3 to his falsified status before handing it over. Line thanked him for the transparency and suggested they clear the camp to get some rest, noting that they needed to reach a lodging area at the foot of the mountain by morning. As they prepared to sleep in the forest, Tomoya felt a wave of unease. Upon discovering there was only a single tent, he pointed out that it was hardly sufficient for 2 people. Line dismissed his concern, suggesting they simply lie side by side. When Tomoya tried to argue the propriety of the situation, Line misinterpreted his hesitation as fear of a monster attack, assuring him that she would sense any approaching threat immediately. Tomoya clarified that safety wasn't his concern, but seeing that she genuinely didn't mind the proximity, he resolved to steel himself. He sat in the tent, trying to flush away any impure thoughts, and questioning how she could be so seemingly defenseless next to a man. He eventually drifted off, but when he woke, Line was gone. He stepped out into the pre-dawn darkness and noticed a strange glimmer in the distance. Following the light to a nearby lake, he was shocked to find Line bathing without clothes. He dove behind a tree, panicked that if she discovered him, he would lose her hard-earned trust. However, Line sensed his presence instantly. She drew her sword and leveled a nearby cluster of trees with a single swing. When she realized it was Tomoya, she lowered her weapon and smiled, asking if he was injured. Relieved but deeply embarrassed, Tomoya confirmed he was fine and explained he had come looking for her after waking up alone. He confessed that he worried she might think he was peeking, but Line laughed off the idea. She claimed that no one would be interested in a body like hers, one she described as overly muscular and lacking the delicate charm men typically preferred. Tomoya realized this was why she had been so casual about their physical contact. She had absolutely no concept of her own beauty. He looked at her, seeing an unparalleled beauty whose hard work was etched into her form, and decided he had to set her straight. He told her firmly that she was an incredibly attractive woman. When Line dismissed it as flattery, Tomoya raised his voice to emphasize his point, stating that her dedication to the sword only added to her charm, and that seeing her just now had made his heart race. Line shrieked as the reality of his words sank in, admitting it was an honor to hear such a thing. Tomoya noted that her voice was shaking, which caused her to snap at him to shut up, blaming him for her state. Tomoya sighed, thinking that while her composed warrior persona was beautiful, this bashful girlish reaction was equally endearing. When he accidentally let a small laugh slip, Line exploded in embarrassment, calling him the worst for laughing at her. She abruptly ended the conversation and insisted they return to the tent. Back inside the cramped quarters, Tomoya called out her name. Line answered with a stutter, asking what he wanted. He simply asked if she felt cramped, to which she replied that it was perfectly fine. A moment later, she felt a slight contact and asked if he had touched her. Tomoya quickly deflected, claiming it was either the blanket or perhaps a ghost. The Margino Mountains are a sprawling range stretching 100 kilometers south of the adventurer town of Lugard, with jagged peaks reaching elevations of 3,000 meters. For those traveling between the Flarelode Kingdom and the magic nation of Clayon, crossing these heights is a necessity, yet the abundance of lethal C-rank and B-rank monsters once made it a nearly impossible feat for merchants. Years ago, masters of earth magic dedicated themselves to carving a tunnel through the stone, finally allowing for safe passage. Outside the inn, Line offered an apology for the delay, informing Tomoya that she had finished stowing the horse with the innkeeper. Tomoya stifled a yawn, privately admitting that his nerves had made a restful night's sleep impossible. Line stepped closer, her expression turning serious. She emphasized that before they set out to face an A-rank red dragon, they needed to adopt a professional mindset. She suggested they set aside the awkwardness of the previous night to focus entirely on the mission. Tomoya agreed, and Line declared that the Red Knight Brigade was officially commencing its first subjugation request. As they began the ascent, Tomoya retrieved a flask of water from his dimensional storage. He remarked on how comfortable it was to climb a mountain without the burden of heavy packs. Line attributed their smooth progress to his rare storage skills, and noted that their light equipment would allow them to reach the summit without delay. Their progress was suddenly interrupted by a mocking voice. A group of adventurers from the C-rank party Iron Shield approached, led by an arrogant man named Kurt. He jeered at their appearance, asking if they were heading to a picnic, and asserting that a duo like them stood no chance against an A-rank target. When Line clarified their objective was the Red Dragon, Kurt laughed, stating that his party was merely there to hunt the weaker monsters fleeing in terror from the beast. At that moment, a pack of dragon lizards surrounded the group. Kurt called Tomoya and Line weaklings, and told them to stand back and witness a display of true strength. He and his comrades engaged the monsters, managing to defeat a few, but Line was visibly irritated by his insults. Deciding to end the display, she drew her blade and unleashed a sky slash, obliterating the remaining monsters in an instant. Kurt was paralyzed with shock, stammering as he asked what had just occurred. Line sheathed her sword and sighed, coolly informing him that she had simply finished the job. She noted that they were clearly on a different level of strength. While Kurt admitted she was powerful, he pointed a finger at Tomoya, arguing that the boy was a different story since he hadn't even moved. Line countered that there had simply been no need for him to act, but Kurt remained skeptical that a kid could possess any real power. Suddenly, a wyvern materialized behind Tomoya, its jaws snapping inches from his face. Kurt shouted a warning as Line called out Tomoya's name in terror. Tomoya instinctively closed his eyes, expecting the worst, but was startled by the sound of a violent explosion. To the collective shock of everyone present, the wyvern had been reduced to a bloody mist upon impact with Tomoya. Tomoya stared at the space where the monster had been, realizing that his infinite defense, mana and magic defense had activated automatically. He concluded that his stats acted like an unbreakable wall, reflecting the force of the wyvern's strike back upon itself. Having always focused on dodging, he had never realized he possessed such a passive, devastating power. Line, recovering her composure, placed her hands on her hips and proudly asked Kurt if he still doubted Tomoya's capabilities. Kurt bowed deeply, offering a sincere apology for underestimating them. As they continued upward, Tomoya noted that the number of monsters had dwindled significantly. Line explained that they were nearing the summit and that the local wildlife was paralyzed with fear. Earlier, Kurt, who is now showing respect, said the same with Line's assessment, noting that the monsters were fleeing in fear. Line mentioned that the wyvern Tomoya had just defeated was once considered the undisputed ruler of the mountain. Tomoya remarked that if such a creature was being driven out, it was no wonder travelers were struggling, which Line cited as even more reason to eliminate the threat. Finally, they reached the summit, and came face to face with the Red Dragon. It stood tall, its massive frame dwarfing the landscape. Tomoya felt the air grow heavy with tension, noting that the ground trembled with every stomp of the beast's feet. Its fangs and scales were absurdly massive, a testament to its status as a mid-tier A-rank monster. Line issued her final instructions. They were to target the face while being careful not to damage the valuable fangs, and if they could sever a wing, they would hold the advantage. She asked if he was ready. Tomoya drew his sword, confirming he was prepared. With a nod of mutual trust, they braced themselves for the hunt. Tomoya observed Line closely, noting the absolute absence of fear in her expression. Her face was that of a warrior who had long since resolved to fight, and seeing her determination, he tightened his grip on his sword. He silently vowed to support her so she could fight to her heart's content, making it his primary goal to ensure she suffered no serious injuries. When the dragon unleashed a deafening roar, Line charged with lethal swiftness, her blade carving a wound into the beast's massive flank. The dragon retaliated by breathing a torrent of flame toward her, but she remained composed, casting a magical barrier to negate the heat. As she held the line, Tomoya focused inward, manually manipulating his agility, attack, and magic attack to 10,000. He leaped into the air, aiming a precise strike at the dragon's left wing, but the creature's instincts were sharp, and it narrowly dodged the blow. Tomoya quickly apologized for the miss, but Line reassured him, noting that their coordinated teamwork had already rattled the beast. She remarked that even a red dragon with such keen senses must realize it was in a losing situation. Expecting it to attempt a retreat, she prepared to meet it head-on. Then she dropped a sudden revelation. She had lied about the status card she showed him earlier. Admitting that she usually hid her true numbers for convenience, she decided that given the circumstances, she would tell him the truth. Tomoya activated his appraisal skill, and was stunned to see that her actual stats were 3 times higher than those she had previously displayed. Line then announced she would demonstrate her mutation skill, Spatial Severing Flame. She swung her blade, and the air itself seemed to tear air as she sliced into the dragon's body. The beast growled in agonizing pain as the attack bypassed external defenses, burning it from the inside out until it collapsed, lifeless to the ground. Sheathing her sword, Line declared the battle over, noting that no monster could survive such an assault. Tomoya praised the sheer power of the technique. Line explained that the skill directly incinerates the space it passes through, which was why the dragon had been scorched internally even by a partial strike to the abdomen. Tomoya expressed his understanding but questioned why she had gone to such lengths to hide her strength, even reducing her displayed stats to a third of their value. He also asked why she had suddenly felt comfortable sharing the secret with him. Line explained that individuals with mutation skills are rare and often attract unwanted attention, necessitating the use of concealment. However, she suddenly paused, narrowing her eyes. "Did I ever actually tell you my exact stat values?" she asked. Tomoya realized too late that he had cited her specific numbers, information he could only have obtained through appraisal. He cursed his own carelessness, realizing that his appraisal skill wasn't even listed on the falsified status card he had shown her. With his own web of lies exposed, he found himself unable to conjure a believable excuse. Line told him to sit on the ground, noting the guilty look on his face. She remarked that since the sun was still high, it was time they properly shared their information. She revealed her true card, showing that she had hidden her family name, class, and skills to avoid various troubles. She admitted that Red Knight had actually become her title after she accidentally exposed her class in the past. She had suspected Tomoya was doing the same because his combat style never matched his supposed stats. She confessed that his desperate attempts to maintain his cover had actually been quite funny to her. When Tomoya asked when she first knew he was lying, Line revealed she had noticed the moment she heard his stats at the guild. Having seen him fight the Grey Wolves, she knew the numbers didn't add up. She had simply played along out of kindness. More importantly, she told him that from their first meeting, she felt he was someone she could genuinely trust. Having traveled alone for so long, his presence was the first to make her want to form a partnership. Moved by her honesty and her good eye for people, Tomoya decided to fully trust her. He released his concealment and handed her his true card. Line stared at the two symbols, asking what they meant. Tomoya explained they represented infinity, meaning his power could grow without limit. He further detailed his mutation skill, All Infinity, which allowed him to acquire every existing skill in the world and use them at an infinite level. Tomoya admitted the power was completely broken, but Line merely chuckled, satisfied that her judgment had been correct. She told him that while the stats were incredible, he was the one who was truly amazing. She handed back the card and suggested they prepare to leave. She asked if he had room in his item box for the proof of subjugation, specifically wanting the fangs to craft a new sword. Tomoya inquired about the rest of the massive carcass, wondering if it wouldn't be a problem if the meat rotted. Line explained that the body was too large for scavengers to finish quickly, and that the guild would send a recovery team once they reported back. Hearing this, Tomoya had a better idea. He activated his storage, and to Line's amazement, pulled the entire red dragon inside. He confirmed that his storage capacity was also unlimited. With the summit cleared, Tomoya suggested they head back, aiming to reach the town before sunset. After walking for quite some time, Tomoya calculated that they should be approaching the outpost shortly. Line concurred, noting that they would likely arrive in another 10 minutes. Their progress was suddenly interrupted by a piercing scream, echoing from the direction of the outpost. Line surged forward, shouting that she was unclear on the details but certain it was an emergency. She urged him to hurry. Before following, Tomoya manually adjusted his agility status to 30,000. Upon arriving at the scene, they discovered another red dragon, significantly larger than the previous one, wreaking havoc upon the outpost. Tomoya activated his appraisal skill and was shocked to discover that this specimen was a high-rank monster, its power existing on an entirely different level. Line observed that while the damage was significant, there appeared to be no casualties yet. She asserted that they needed to evacuate those unable to fight before anyone else was harmed. The dragon smashed a carriage with its tail, and its gaze locked onto a group of children. A girl in a white hood bravely stepped forward to shield them. Watching her, Tomoya wondered if she was attempting to protect the other children. The girl shivered in fear and squeezed her eyes shut. Simultaneously, Line prepared to unsheath her sword, cursing as she realized she could not reach them in time. To her astonishment, Tomoya, who had been at the rear only a moment ago, was now standing directly in front of the girl. The moment the dragon exhaled a torrent of fire toward them, Tomoya increased his attack stat to 100 million. He punched the oncoming flames. The strike was so overpowered that it passed through the fire and created a hole in the dragon's head. A thunderous impact followed. Pleased with the result, he turned to ensure the children were safe. When the girl removed her hood, he noticed she possessed black horns and realized she was not human. He lowered himself to the girl's level and asked if she was injured before patting her head, gently telling her that everything was okay now. Tears welled in the girl's eyes before she threw her arms around Tomoya and cried, sobbing that she had been terrified and believed she was going to die. Tomoya hugged her back, telling her that she had done her best. The girl eventually wiped her tears, and when he asked if she was all right now, she nodded. Tomoya smiled, estimating the girl to be about 10 years old. Noting that she was staring at him, he asked if something was the matter. The girl smiled cheerfully and thanked him for saving her. Witnessing her cuteness, Tomoya was struck with awe, thinking to himself that she possessed a terrifying, destructive power. After some time, they gathered inside a cafeteria, where a man named Rikins, a member of the orphan protection organization known as the Deer Group, thanked them for saving the children. Tomoya dismissed the gratitude, remarking that it was was a close call, but he was simply glad he could save them. Line questioned how a red dragon could be here, given the reports that there was only one at the summit. Rikens explained that this one had seemingly flown in today, noting how terrifying it was that A-rank monsters were appearing in succession. He scratched the back of his head, stating he was truly grateful they were there. He admitted it was embarrassing that he could do nothing against the beast. Tomoya countered that his statement wasn't true, noting that he had heard Rikens was the first to fight when it appeared. He told Rikens there was no shame in it, since he had risked his life to protect the children. Rikens replied that while he was repelled instantly, hearing Tomoya say those words made his effort feel worth it. He added that Tomoya had healed his injuries and expressed that he truly didn't know how to voice his gratitude. It appeared Tomoya had healed everyone else who was injured besides him, becoming the great benefactor of everyone in the inn. Tomoya scratched his head and offered a chuckle in response. Line remarked that she was surprised as well, adding that Tomoya's reaction in that situation was wonderful, and that her own sword likely wouldn't have made it in time. She stated it was thanks to Tomoya that everyone was saved. Tomoya thanked her, adding that he had simply been desperate and didn't clearly remember his own actions. Privately, he thought back to seeing the girl try to protect the children despite having no power. He felt an absolute necessity to protect her. He was truly glad he could help her, yet her smile lingered in his mind. It was overwhelmingly healing and cute, as if he had witnessed the ultimate essence of something. He turned to Line and asked if she had been poking his side for a while. Surprised, Line asked what he was talking about and clarified she hadn't touched him. She then noticed someone, and chuckled. When Tomoya turned, he was startled to see the girl standing there. When he said hello to her, the girl simply replied with a yay. Feeling he needed to do something, Reckon stood up and asked why the child was there, noting that the children's room should have been locked. He apologized and excused himself to check on the situation. The girl continued to stare at Tomoya, making him feel awkward. He realized he had never dealt with small children before, and wondered if he should perform a trick. Suddenly, the girl sat on his lap. He asked her what her intention was, but she only looked at him and chuckled. Watching from the side, Line remarked that he was certainly well liked. Tomoya disagreed and asked if that was her only thought on the matter. Line pondered as she looked at them, stating it was unfair for Tomoya to be holding such a cute child. She admitted she was jealous and wanted to trade places. Tomoya clarified that wasn't what he was asking, but he eventually gave up. Reckons returned and apologized, thanking them for waiting. He reported that while the lock was open, everyone else was safely in their room. He wondered aloud who could have possibly opened it. The girl stood up and stated she had jiggled it until it opened. Reckons found this hard to believe, as she was usually a quiet child. He suggested that perhaps seeing Tomoya's exploit up close had influenced her. Noting she seemed to have grown quite attached to him, he apologized for her being a nuisance. Tomoya looked at the girl and silently reflected that while he had saved her, her level of attachment was surprising. He felt that his ability to save her was more a result of his status than himself. Thinking that he wasn't personally amazing, he felt a sense of guilt, as if he were manipulating someone's affection with his borrowed power. He scratched his head and asked Reckons what usually happens to the children protected by the Deer Group. Reckons explained that they are typically entrusted to affiliated orphanages, and occasionally couples who cannot have children take them as foster children. Tomoya asked if this was financially difficult, noting that it wasn't a profit-making venture. Reckons admitted it was embarrassing to say, but they mostly relied on donations, often from people like himself, who grew up in orphanages, though lords and ladies occasionally provided support. Tomoya acknowledged this, and then noticed the girl shaking her head repeatedly. He asked what was wrong. The girl told him her name was Lunaria, and that he could call her Luna. Tomoya addressed her by name and asked if she had business with him. Blushing, Luna told him she wanted to know his name. When Tomoya provided it, Luna beamed with joy and chuckled. Line laughed, asking if she was really that happy just to know a name. Tomoya asked Line what he should do, but she only asked if he was troubled. Watching them, Reckons finally stated he had something to say, and asked Tomoya if they could speak privately. When Tomoya agreed, Reckons suggested they move elsewhere because of the crowd. Since Luna was still on his lap, Tomoya asked her to leave for a moment, but she refused. To get her to comply, Tomoya promised Luna that he would listen to any request she had later. Luna agreed and stepped away. Line assured Tomoya she would watch over Luna so he wouldn't worry. Once Reckons and Tomoya reached a quiet place, Reckons presented a strict proposal. He asked if Tomoya would consider taking Luna. Seeing Tomoya's surprise, Reckons immediately apologized for the suddenness of his proposal, acknowledging that they had only just met. He admitted it must seem baffling for a stranger to make such a request, and he asked if Tomoya would be willing to listen to the truth of Luna's circumstances. Reckons explained that the two black horns on her head confirmed she was of the demon race. While demons typically reside on the central continent and are rarely seen elsewhere, Luna had been discovered entirely alone on the southern continent. Reckons noted how strange it was for a demon child to be isolated in such a way, speculating that she had either lost her family or been exiled from her home. He remarked that children with such features are often pathologically quiet, as if living in constant fear, and Lunaria had been no different. Since the day they took her in, she had not shown a single smile until today. Seeing her laugh and look so genuinely happy had moved Reckons deeply, leading him to the sudden realization that being with Tomoya might be the best path for her. He confessed he had been worried that an orphanage wouldn't provide the sense of belonging she needed. Reckons emphasized that this was strictly a proposal, and that he did not expect an immediate answer, urging Tomoya to take his time to think it over. Tomoya agreed, sensing sensing no deception in the man's words. He recognized that Reckons was acting out of a deep concern for Luna's future, but the weight of the responsibility troubled him. Tomoya wondered if someone like him, who still lacked a basic understanding of this world's common sense, had any right to influence a young girl's entire life. As they returned to the inn, Reckons informed Tomoya that the group was planning to head toward the town of Lugard. He noted that since there was an orphanage there, Tomoya could visit them once he reached a final decision. Upon seeing Tomoya enter, Luna quickly stood up, called out his name and hugged him tightly, welcoming him back. Recalling his conversation with Reckons, Tomoya looked at her and asked if she would like to come with him. When Luna appeared confused, he rephrased the question, asking what she would do if he said he wanted to take her in so they could stay together forever. Luna beamed and hugged him again, stating that it would make her very happy and that she wanted to stay with him too. When night fell, Line admitted she was somewhat surprised that Tomoya had so suddenly announced his intention to take Luna in. As Tomoya finished drying Luna's hair, he thanked Line for acting as his guarantor. He explained that since he didn't have a proper legal status in this world, he would have been in a difficult bind without her help. Line explained that the orphanage organizations maintained strict rules and managed foster parent information closely. He recalled how she had stepped in to guarantee that she, as a member of the House of Elegante, would take full responsibility if anything happened. When Tomoya asked if she was truly okay with that, Line simply replied that she felt like doing it, and that was all the reason she needed. After they agreed it was time for bed, Tomoya and Luna said goodnight to Line and retreated to their room. As they lay down, Tomoya asked Luna if she wouldn't have preferred staying with Line, but Luna insisted she wanted to share a room with him. Tomoya then asked if there were any places in this world she wanted to visit. He shared his own dream, explaining that he had always wanted to travel freely if he ever had the power, and now that he possessed it, he intended to see the entire world. He suggested they could visit any place she liked along the way. Luna replied that anywhere would be fine as long as she was with him. She confessed that she was incredibly happy because no one had ever told her they wanted to stay with her before. She told him that his eyes were very kind, and because that was the first time she had encountered such kindness, she loved him. She fell asleep shortly after saying those words. Tomoya patted her head, feeling as though he had been over-evaluated lately. He reflected on his actions, protecting Cynthia, taking on requests with Line, and defeating the Red Dragon, and acknowledged that these feats were only possible because of the status granted to him by the gods of this world. Yet despite this, the people he met treated him as if he himself possessed great value. He felt that meeting such kind individuals was a stroke of luck far greater than any numerical status. He concluded that while he hadn't earned his power through his own strength, the relationships he had built were the result of his own efforts. He resolved to use his borrowed power as much as necessary to ensure that everyone involved with him became happy. He looked forward to a future of traveling and meeting new people with Luna and Line by his side, and with that thought, he allowed himself to rest. 3 days after the successful Red Dragon subjugation, the group gathered within the E-rank mansion. Tomoya scratched the back of his neck awkwardly as he explained the situation, stating that he had ended up taking Luna in. Luna, sitting beside him, added simply that she had been taken in, while Line noted that she had become the girl's official guarantor. Rissel and Cynthia were visibly shocked by the revelation. Rissel coughed to regain his composure and apologized for his earlier reaction, remarking that it appeared many things had transpired beyond the simple completion of a subjugation request. While Cynthia commented that camping out in nature sounded like fun, Tomoya felt a surge of relief that the bathing incident with Line remained a secret. Cynthia continued, expressing her amazement at the news of the Red Dragon's defeat. She mentioned that an adventurer who returned the previous day had spoken passionately about the feat. Rissel glanced at Luna, noting that while they were aware the request was settled, he hadn't expected their party to grow by one more person. He explained that the Deer Group was a wonderful organization dedicated to helping children worldwide, and mentioned that his house provided a fair amount of donations to them. When Cynthia asked if the girl was indeed Lunaria, Luna confirmed it with a cheerful smile. Cynthia introduced herself, and Luna stepped closer, warmly saying it was nice to meet her. Stunned by the girl's cuteness, Cynthia patted her head and promised to take care of her. She began mumbling about how adorable Luna was, but suddenly froze when she caught her father's gaze. She apologized, admitting she couldn't help herself because Luna was so cute. Tomoya assured her it was fine, informing her that they had been captivated by her the entire journey back. Line agreed, noting she couldn't count how many times Luna's charm had almost gotten the better of her. Observing how everyone adored the girl, Rissel coughed again before asking if they had collected their rewards. Tomoya confirmed they had received the holy gold coin, which they split evenly, and had also earned a significant sum from selling monster materials to the guild. Rissel acknowledged that the business regarding the request was officially settled. Tomoya then addressed Cynthia and Rissel directly, stating there was something he wanted them to hear regarding his future plans. He informed them that he intended to leave the town and embark on a journey. While he planned to stay a little longer, his ultimate goal was to see more of the world and travel together with Luna. Cynthia's face grew gloomy as she asked if he was really leaving. She managed to smile, saying that while it was sad, she could not stop him if that was his will. Rissel agreed, promising to support Tomoya's desires however he could. Touched Touched by their sincerity, Tomoya bowed respectfully and thanked them, silently vowing to one day repay the kindness of these good people. Cynthia spoke up again, expressing concern for Luna's safety on the road. She pointed out that since Luna was a demon girl, people might attempt to harass her. Tomoya stated firmly that he would crush anyone who tried, and promised to protect her. However, he realized they might not always be together, and that they needed measures for when Luna was alone. He decided that seeing her status might help him figure something out. He turned to Luna and asked for permission to see her status. Luna remained silent for a moment before agreeing, as long as it was him asking. As he activated his appraisal skill, Tomoya wondered if she had suffered a bad experience related to her status in the past. Her status revealed she was 12 years old with the White Shrine Maiden occupation. While her physical and magical stats were low and her skills were all level 1, including healing magic, summoning magic, contract, divine magic, and concealment. Tomoya was shocked to see her mutation skill, divine summoning. As Line, Rissel, and Cynthia looked at him worriedly, Tomoya could only utter the word 12. The room fell silent. Luna pouted at him, calling him rude and insisting she wasn't small. Tomoya quickly agreed, though he secretly thought she looked even younger than 12. Cynthia chuckled, suggesting that Tomoya had likely forgotten that demons grow slower than humans, which led to his misunderstanding. Luna eventually calmed down and forgave him. Tomoya thanked her and patted her head. Leaning in, Cynthia whispered to Line that the difference in growth rates actually only occurs after early childhood, so it didn't technically apply to Luna yet. Line whispered back that it was probably wiser not to mention that out loud. A maid arrived to serve a fresh tray of sweets, a sight that immediately lit up Luna's face with joy. Watching her eat with such pure happiness, Tomoya idly wondered if he should add the mastery of confectionery to his list of skills. Luna held up a slice of the treat, offering it to him, and Tomoya leaned in to take a bite. He savored the flavor, noting the crisp yet gentle texture, and the way the rich buttery aroma bloomed with every mouthful. Line, observing his focused appreciation, remarked that he sounded like a professional food critic, suggesting such refined commentary felt slightly out of character for him. Tomoya chuckled, explaining that he simply wanted to convey exactly how delicious the sweets truly were. He then noticed Luna staring intently at her own portion, and asked what was troubling her. Luna looked up and asked if he liked it. Misinterpreting the question, Tomoya replied warmly that he liked her. Luna beamed with happiness at the sudden confession, quickly reciprocating by saying she loved him too. However, she giggled and clarified that she was actually asking about the food. Flushed with embarrassment, Tomoya corrected himself, admitting he liked the sweets while internally cursing the awkward misunderstanding, even if his slip of the tongue had been the honest truth. Luna then stood up and whispered something into Cynthia's ear. Cynthia nodded enthusiastically, calling it a wonderful idea, and turned to Line to ask for a favor. After a brief hushed exchange, Line stood and told Tomoya they should step outside for a while, as she had something important to discuss with him. The two headed into town, passing various stalls in the East District. Tomoya remarked on how lively the area remained, finding it almost hard to believe it had been under attack by a pack of grey wolves only a few days prior. He then prompted Line, asking what it was she wanted to discuss. Line hesitated for a moment, before asking if his plan to travel the world was a serious commitment. When Tomoya affirmed that it was, she asked if he had a specific destination in mind. Tomoya scratched his head, admitting he hadn't decided at all. Since Luna didn't have a preference, he figured they would simply choose their path as they went. He then turned the question back to her, noting he hadn't heard much about her own future plans. Line explained that she was also planning to leave Lugard soon, as she rarely stayed in one place for long. She mentioned having traveled as far as the northern continent, where she had a dwarf acquaintance she intended to visit. Her goal was to bring them the red dragon fang they had acquired so they could forge it into a new sword. She grew quiet for a moment before continuing, confessing that spending the last few days with him had changed her perspective. She had always traveled alone and assumed that was the only way she wanted it, but the time spent taking on requests with him had been more fun than anything she had experienced before. She admitted she found herself wishing that kind of happiness could last forever. As she struggled to voice her final request, Tomoya cut her off, stating that he already understood exactly what she wanted to say. He told her he had been planning to say the same thing himself, and didn't like being beaten to the punch. He looked at her and asked if they could travel together. Line smiled, confirming that was exactly what she wanted. Tomoya felt a surge of genuine happiness, glad to know that Line shared his feelings about their partnership. Upon returning to the mansion, they were greeted by the sight of several charred, blackened sweets that Cynthia and Luna had prepared. Cynthia explained that after seeing how much Tomoya enjoyed the earlier cookies, Luna had desperately wanted to make something for him herself, but the effort had resulted in a bit of a disaster. Tomoya looked at the burnt offerings, touched by the fact that Luna had worked so hard to bake for him. Despite Luna's worried warnings that they were bitter, he picked up a slice and took a bite. As he chewed, he noted the rough, dry texture and the overwhelming bitterness of the scorched dough. As food, it was undeniably poor. However, he looked at the anxious girl and told her with a smile that it was delicious, the best thing he had ever eaten. When Luna asked if he truly meant it, he patted her head and gave her firm confirmation. The all-infinity ability that Tomoya alone possessed was truly an anomaly. It was an extraordinary mutation that granted him the power to utilize every normal skill in existence at an infinite level. These normal skills bestowed upon the inhabitants of the world by the chief god El Tora were vast and wide-ranging in their applications. Thus far, Tomoya had only scratched the surface, employing a handful of these powers such as appraisal, concealment, and dimensional storage. Tomoya expressed to Line that while he had no desire to master every single skill on a whim, he recognized that certain abilities would be vital for their survival and success as adventurers. He essentially begged Line to act as his mentor, guiding him through the most practical applications of his vast potential. Line admitted that being asked to teach again felt somewhat strange, yet she was eager to see what he could do. She began by explaining several convenient skills. First was cleansing magic, capable of instantly removing grime and dirt from both objects and living bodies. Then came creation, a skill that used the user's magic power to materialize any object they had previously seen. Clairvoyance was another, which significantly heightened visual perception. At high levels, it even allowed the user to project an image of a specific person or location from afar. Enemy search operated by radiating magic power outward from the user, revealing the locations of all living beings and substances within a specific radius. Finally, she described the barrier skill, which created a transparent protective wall. However, she cautioned that even a powerful barrier typically had a maximum duration of 1 hour. Tomoya nodded in understanding, noting that creation and barrier appeared particularly useful for their journey. He asked if he could attempt a test right then and there. After Luna handed him a physical sword to use as a reference, Tomoya activated his creation magic. From thin air, a perfect replica of the blade materialized in his hand. He was genuinely amazed that he had actually succeeded. Line's eyes widened as she inspected the duplicate, remarking that no matter how closely she looked, she could detect no difference between the two. She noted that creation was regarded as the most superior among the numerous normal skills for a very good reason. Tomoya asked if that was its reputation, and Line confirmed it, adding that only a tiny fraction of the population possessed creation magic. She had only ever heard of it in rumors. She mentioned that dimensional storage was considered the next most superior skill after creation, which made Tomoya's ability to use both simultaneously quite bizarre. Tomoya acknowledged that he was clearly an extraordinary case. He pointed out that with this power he could create as many tents as they needed, which would prevent any future tension regarding sleeping arrangements. Line flushed a deep, embarrassed red at the comment, stating firmly that she thought they had agreed never to bring up the tent incident again. A short while later, as Tomoya examined a simple spoon he had created, he realized a significant limitation. He could only create objects he had physically seen since arriving in this world. This meant he could not use his magic to manifest modern weaponry or technology from Earth. When Line asked if he had said something, Tomoya dismissed it, telling her it was merely a thought regarding his original world. He reflected privately that while creating tools for their journey was fine, he had to be extremely careful not to create money. There was the obvious ethical issue, but beyond that, he felt a personal responsibility to have enough resourcefulness to provide for Luna through legitimate means rather than cheating the system. He then informed Line that he wanted to test his next plan, the barrier. Recalling Line's earlier explanation, Tomoya thought that a clad barrier, one that would wrap directly around a person like a suit of armor, would be the best way to ensure Luna's safety. He asked Luna if she would be his test subject, and when she agreed, he moved his palm close to her head and activated the spell. Line then suggested they put the defense to the test. She told Luna to simply watch and stay still. Line summoned a small flame and moved it toward the girl, asking if she felt any heat. When Luna replied that she was perfectly fine, Line instructed her to slowly move her hand closer to the fire. Luna reached out until her hand was positioned directly in the center of the flames. She was amazed to find that she couldn't feel even a flicker of warmth. Tomoya was relieved that the experiment was a success. As long as he maintained the clad barrier, Luna would be shielded from almost any enemy. The only drawback remained the 1-hour time limit. While the defense was top-notch, it left a gap if Tomoya had to be away for an extended period. Line agreed, noting that while she could protect Luna if they were together, there would undoubtedly be times when both of them had their hands full in a fight. Tomoya wished for a more permanent guarantee that Luna could handle herself. He decided that the best course of action was to improve Luna's own combat capabilities, and he suggested they have a serious discussion about her training. When Luna agreed, the two of them simultaneously bowed deeply before Line, asking for her guidance since they were both at a loss for how to proceed. Line took on the responsibility with pride, admitting she didn't mind being relied upon. After analyzing Luna's skills, Line dismissed concealment and healing magic as priorities, noting that they weren't particularly useful for offensive training right now. Instead, she decided to focus on 3 normal skills: summoning magic, contract magic, and holy magic. She explained that summoning calls forth monsters from across the world, while contract magic is required to bind and control those summoned beings. This was why most people possessed both skills together. Holy magic was more complex. It possessed the unique property of erasing magical power rather than just dealing raw damage like Line's fire spells. Because the damage dealt by holy magic was heavily influenced by the nature of the target, it was notoriously difficult to handle. Furthermore, as a magic-based skill, the power output was tied directly to the user's magic stats. Regarding Luna's mutation skill, divine summoning, Line admitted it was so rare that there were likely very few people in the world who even knew how it functioned. When Tomoya asked Luna if she knew how to use it, and she shook her her head, he suggested they begin by testing her holy magic first. The group began walking, with Line explaining that it was much easier to learn through direct experience by confronting an actual enemy. She expected monsters to appear in the area soon. Tomoya asked if she was certain it was a good idea to put Luna into a real fight so quickly. Luna insisted she was fine and would do her best. Tomoya agreed, but then he suddenly panicked, worrying that seeing monster blood and corpses might be too traumatic for a child. Line dryly reminded him that Luna had already watched them slaughter monsters on their trek back from the mountains, so his concern was a bit late. Tomoya knelt down to Luna's level, telling her that if she felt even slightly sick, she had to tell him immediately. When they encountered a little phoenix, Line urged Luna to take her shot. Luna stretched out her palm and activated a holy ball. The small bird looked terrified for a brief moment as the magic soared toward it, but to everyone's shock, absolutely nothing happened when the spell hit. The area fell into an awkward, heavy silence. The little phoenix flew away, appearing to have a metaphorical question mark hovering over its head in confusion. Line cleared her throat and suggested they move on and try again with the next monster. Line stepped toward a flat patch of earth and carefully placed a sheet of specialized magic paper on the ground. She explained that the paper was inscribed with a complex magic circle specifically designed for summoning, noting that while she had purchased this one before their arrival, some veteran summoners were quite particular about crafting their own from scratch. She turned to the group, her expression serious, and stated that the summoning magic they were about to test was the real deal. Tomoya, trying to grasp the mechanics of this new power, questioned whether an individual's personal stats had any bearing on the outcome of a summon. Line confirmed that stats were indeed a factor, as the summoner's magic power served as the fundamental driving force for the creature. However, she added a crucial caveat. In summoning magic, the inherent strength of the monster itself plays a massive role. Even if a person possesses an exceptionally high status, the monster that answers the call might be far more powerful than expected. She emphasized that they would not truly know what kind of entity would appear until the ritual was complete. Turning to Luna, Line gave her clear instructions. The girl was to visualize the specific conditions of the monster she wished to call forth in her mind, and then pour her magic power directly into the circle. Tomoya leaned in, curiously asking Luna what kind of creature she was imagining. Luna replied simply that she wanted a monster that would be fun to be with. Tomoya smiled and told her he hoped a monster she could truly become friends with would answer her call. Luna placed her small palm above the magic circle and began to channel her power. Suddenly, the circle erupted in a blinding, brilliant light that forced them all to shield their eyes. When the radiance faded, a massive Fenrir stood before them, its sheer presence leaving Tomoya breathless. He quickly activated his appraisal skill and was stunned to find that the creature was designated as a high S-rank Fenrir. Luna, looking up at the towering beast with wide eyes, asked innocently what a high S-rank actually meant. The Fenrir's voice resonated through the clearing as it spoke, asking Luna if she was the summoner who had called him from his realm. He noted that it was fine for her to snuggle up to his fur, but he commanded that if she had actual business with him, she should state it clearly. Confused by the formal terminology, Luna tilted her head and looked back at Tomoya and Line, asking for clarification. As the two approached the divine beast, Tomoya asked if it was acceptable to address him simply as Fenrir. He began to explain the reason they had performed the summon, but the Fenrir suddenly cut him off, alert and sharp. "Enemy," the beast intoned. Without warning, a high-ranking gray wolf pounced from the brush, aiming for the group. The Fenrir moved with a speed that defied its size, effortlessly crushing the predator in its powerful jaws. With the wolf's blood still staining its muzzle, the Fenrir remarked with a hint of disdain that it was foolish for a mere gray wolf to think it could oppose those who had summoned him. While Luna was captivated by the beast's incredible speed, Tomoya reflected silently on the scene. The Fenrir clearly possessed the power to eliminate formidable threats in a heartbeat, and judging by its protective actions, it had no intention of turning on them. He realized that if such a powerhouse remained by Luna's side, his worries for her safety would vanish. However, when asked if he could stay permanently, the Fenrir replied that it was impossible for several reasons. Primarily, he explained that Luna's magic power was overwhelmingly small. With the current supply she could provide, he would only be able to manifest in this world for a few minutes each day. Furthermore, he revealed that he could not form a formal contract. He explained that he does not always answer summons. He had only appeared this time because he felt like it, and depending on future circumstances, he might not be able to return. Therefore, even if Luna possessed contract magic, he could not accept the bond. "It seems it is about time," the Fenrir stated, noting he needed to return before Luna's magic reserves were completely depleted. Luna looked up at him sadly, asking if he was going home, but she bid him a warm "see you later," adding that they should definitely meet again. The Fenrir agreed, promising to answer her call whenever possible before vanishing into thin air. Line let out a long, heavy sigh, remarking that the day was truly full of surprises, and that amazing didn't even begin to describe what they had just witnessed. She explained that the Fenrir was known as one of the three great divine beasts of the southern continent, and she was genuinely awestruck by Luna's talent in summoning such a legend. Tomoya lamented the missed opportunity, noting it would have been the perfect bodyguard for Luna. Line suggested they keep moving, pointing out that even if they attempted more summoning, the core issue remained Luna's low stats. Until her magic power increased, her active summoning time would always be too short. She explained that they could increase her status through the blessing of the gods, which is granted to those who subjugate monsters posing a threat to people. Tomoya worriedly asked if this meant Luna had to defeat monsters herself, as her current current strength made that seem impossible. He resolved silently to stay by her side no matter what, vowing to protect her. Line then revealed a potential loophole. She explained that contract magic involves both the contractor and the monster presenting their conditions. The bond is only forged when both parties accept. Once a contract is active, a powerful compulsion prevents it from being broken without mutual agreement. Crucially, she noted that monsters do not have a status of their own and cannot receive God's blessing. However, if a contracted monster defeats an enemy, the blessing is instead funneled directly to the contractor. This allows a summoner to increase their status without ever personally striking a blow. Tomoya listened intently, then asked if contract magic was limited only to monsters. Line admitted she had never heard of a human-to-human contract before, but she smiled and suggested it might be worth a try. Tomoya felt a surge of hope. If the common sense of the world dictated contracts were for monsters, he would break that rule. Since his own stats were already infinite and he had no need for more blessings, he planned to use the contract to transfer every blessing he earned directly to Luna. Line explained that the ritual required physical contact. As Tomoya took Luna's hand, he focused on the logic of his all-infinity skill. Line warned Luna that the magic was difficult to handle, and told her not to overthink it. She then asked Tomoya if he had decided on the conditions he would demand. Tomoya leaned down and whispered to Luna, and once they reached an agreement, they began the process. A soft glowing light emanated from their joined hands. When it faded, a circular magical mark remained etched into Tomoya's hand. Line observed that the ritual appeared to be a success. Tomoya, eager to verify the effect, suggested they find a suitable monster to test if the blessing transfer actually worked. However, as he looked toward the horizon, his eyes widened. In the distance, a massive swarming horde of monsters was approaching from both the land and the sky. Line's eyes narrowed as she scanned the horizon, her voice tight with growing alarm. She estimated there were at least 300 monsters in the swarming mass, and their trajectory was unmistakable. They were heading directly toward the town of Lugard. What truly unsettled her was their composition. Every single creature was at least B rank. She found it baffling that such powerful distinct species which would normally never cooperate were flocking together in a unified direction. Tomoya nodded, his expression grim as he echoed her concerns. He noted that the monsters were acting unnaturally, moving with a frantic energy that suggested they weren't attacking, but panicking. Looking over their shoulders toward the rear of the horde, he wondered aloud if they were all running away from something even more terrifying. To their shared horror, a crimson dragon appeared among the swarming wyverns. Line's breath hitched as she identified it as an S-rank higher-tier monster. Tomoya asked if it was common for such a creature to be seen fleeing, but Line shook her head vehemently. She explained that in the years she had been stationed in Lugard, she hadn't heard of a single A-rank appearing, let alone an S-rank. The sudden emergence of 2 red dragons in the mountains, and now this crimson dragon was a string of impossible mysteries. Tomoya realized that regardless of the cause, if that horde reached Lugard, the town would be decimated. He told Line he needed to stop them, and that he wanted to test if the effects of their new contract magic worked as intended. He instructed Line to stay by Luna's side as a precaution. As he stepped forward, Tomoya weighed his options. Rather than focusing solely on the dragon in the clouds, he decided to prioritize wiping out the massive swarm of B ranks on the ground first. He reasoned that magic would be more efficient than a blade or his fists for a wide-scale annihilation. He focused inward, setting his magic attack to 1 million, and unleashed a massive holy ball of pure energy. The impact was absolute. In a single flash, nearly every B-rank monster on the land was annihilated. The sheer scale of the destruction even shocked the crimson dragon circling above. In a strange turn of events, the dragon suddenly breathed a torrent of fire toward the few remaining monsters on the ground, a move that startled both Tomoya and Line. Tomoya braced himself for an aerial assault, but the dragon merely glanced at him before banking its wings and fleeing in the opposite direction. Watching it vanish, Tomoya reflected on the encounter. Having met the Fenrir, a monster capable of speech and complex thought, he felt a strange, intuitive sense of trust that the Crimson Dragon wasn't the type to harm people indiscriminately. As the immediate crisis passing Lugard subsided, Tomoya stretched his hand. Luna immediately clung to him, her eyes shining with admiration as she called him cool and praised his amazing magic. Tomoya quickly checked her status and felt a wave of relief. The contract magic had worked perfectly, and her levels had spiked by a staggering amount. He patted her head, noting that at this rate, Yukino and the others from his past wouldn't even be a match for her. When Line curiously asked who Yukino was, Tomoya simply told her not to worry about it, though he silently wondered how those people were faring these days. Line expressed her relief that the magic contract was a success, but her curiosity got the better of her. She asked what specific condition Tomoya had demanded from Luna, in exchange for the massive transfer of power, jokingly wondering if it was something as simple as providing him with snacks. Tomoya explained the terms. While he, the contract subject, would transfer every single benefit and blessing gained from defeating monsters to the contractor, Luna had a single duty to fulfill. Once every 30 days, she had to tell him exactly how she felt about being with him. Line was surprised by the sentimental nature of the condition. She mumbled to herself that as long as the two of them were happy, she supposed it was fine. Chapters end at 15. Thank you for watching, guys. I hope you loved this manga. Have a good day.